Stop, but before I realized it, my feet had stopped. Sensing a faint alteration in the strained air, I cowered. At some point, my face had become soaked with sweat, and my knees seemed about to start knocking. Unable to bear it any longer, I turned around. I lost the game, but there was no one behind me after all. There weren't even cars passing. What was this sense of displacement? The ringing in my ear stopped. I'm waiting for a jump scare. I noticed the sound only when it stopped. Up until then, I'd been hearing a sound like my ears ringing. Up until then, I'd completely failed to recognize the fact that they was ringing. Right. And now, I heard nothing. A silence so sudden it seemed like a lie, especially smack in the middle of a city. I had the feeling that I should be able to hear any sounds out there with incredible clarity. I shut my eyes tight and focused on my hearing. But of course, I heard nothing. Strange. This is really strange. Normally, I would surely hear things like trains running in the distance and car horns beeping. Why? Had something gone wrong with my ears? I wanted to shout out loud. I felt like I'd go crazy if I didn't. But I couldn't do it. It was too quiet, and the thought that breaking the silence might bring about something terrible made me hesitate. A single sound unexpectedly entered my soundless world. When I glanced over, at the end of the dirty road lay fallen numerous shiny somethings. I believe they were called crosses before. They were strewn about to cover the asphalt. Well, what the fuck is going on? Is this New Age? Must be. Or is he just having a delusion about it?
十字架?
The instant I recognized them as such, my feet, which before had refused to so much as twist, spontaneously stepped forward. Upon picking up one of the scattered crosses, I found that it was made of metal, and its lengthy point sharpened into something like a needle. A stake? Or a nail? Because it was shaped strangely, I had mistaken it for a cross. I felt buoyant, and it felt buoyant probably. I felt buoyant as I gripped the stake in my hand. I could hear it. The softly resounding sound of something or other. A chilly sound. One that made the muscles of my back freeze up. It came to me at intervals. My feet wouldn't stop. I continued walking as though my consciousness were being sucked in that sound's direction. Was I being driven by morbid curiosity? Or was it because I wanted someone to save me? Because I wanted to be lifted out of that soundless world? This was turning out like something like a German folktale. How did it go? That's right, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Over 100 children were lured away by the sound of his pipe. The sound didn't stop. The unpleasant sound of something being hammered grew closer and closer as it continued forward. The sound was coming from the depths of the narrow alleyway to my left. If I turned the corner, I would discover its source. Why didn't I think of drawing back? The idea didn't even occur to me. It was as though I was being made to move by something outside me. So I turned the corner, and what it leapt into my eyes was floating up out of the darkness, a brilliant red, which is really incredibly bright, and I can barely see because of it. That is better. Actually, no, that's not better. That's not better at all. My first reaction was to think, I've seen this object of art somewhere before. That and it doesn't look real. Some of the screws holding together my heart might have gotten blasted away. My senses might have gone numb. If I were my usual self, terror would have made me let out a pathetic scream, collapse, and urinate on the spot. An object of art, like a hedgehog or a bunch of flower arranging needles. A myriad stakes kept it stuck to the wall. As I gazed mindlessly at it, I realized that a huge quantity of red blood was flowing from the mountain of stakes. The brilliant red I had initially seen was a puddle of blood, lit by the weakened light of the street lamps that just barely reached it. That red lit off a slick luster. Moreover, a bunch of shiny, flesh-like lumps that I couldn't identify were lying around. I started to suck in my breath, but at some point my throat had dried up, and not a single drop of saliva ran down it. I had realized that the thing pinned by the stakes was a human corpse. It was done too immorally, too mercilessly, too thoroughly. And the one who had done so, the one who had driven as many stakes into the concrete, was a single girl. If I were to say how I knew that, because a girl gripping a bundle of stakes with scarlet painted hands was, at this very moment, standing still in front of the object of art. Since her back was facing me, I couldn't tell what kind of expression she was making. But the uniform she wore was from Sume. The rotten garbage-like smell I had sensed earlier reached my nose more and more vividly, making nausea come out of me at intervals. Unable to tolerate it, I covered my mouth and struggled to keep my stomach acid from bursting out. At that point, I finally remembered the origin of my jamais vu, the feeling that I had seen this somewhere before. That one time, the photo. Shogun? I raised my voice without meaning to, without realizing that such an action was fatal. At the sound of my voice, her blood-dyed shoulder shivered, and she slowly turned to face me. Her gaze pierced through me. Such dark eyes. She had killed somebody. She looked at me, winding her eyes as though shocked, then lifted to a tearful smile and squeezed her voice out. She murmured. Glad? What was there to be glad about? More importantly, in a situation like this, why would she see me and smile? Her meaning was unclear. It was so unclear that something cold ran down my spine, and I hastily averted my eyes. I reflexively thought, I don't want to get caught up in anything weird. I couldn't talk to real girls while looking at them in the eye. And even setting that aside, she was unmistakably a murderer. The police would come soon, and I was hungry. Right. That's why I should go home. I should leave right this second. If not, I'll go insane. She knows her name. What the fuck? Yeah. She abruptly called my name. Even though it was the first time we'd met, and I hadn't given her my name. As she watched me, her lips twisted into a horrifically fearless smile, like those of a demon. I screamed. While screaming, I ran blindly. I went on yelling even as though it became hard to breathe, and whatever happened, I desperately kept running. I turned just once to look behind me, but she hadn't come chasing after me. I was running out of air. I could hear my own painful, ragged breathing. I was sitting in front of my PC monitor. My whole body was drenched in sweat, and I had soaked through my clothes. What had happened just now? Had I imagined it? I was about to lose control of my nausea. To suppress it, I took coke out of the fridge and poured it in my mouth. It was a very real seeming delusion, if I do say so myself. But way too guru. I still couldn't catch my breath. Would a delusion leave me without enough air? Like hell it would. Something about my right hand fell out of place. I was gripping my fist so tightly that my fingers turned white. I had been utterly unaware I was doing it. My heart pounding. I relaxed my muscles and slowly opened my hand.